Okay, this is going to be some four-voice practice at 200 words per minute. We have Mr. Morris for the people, Mr. Minor for defense. Let's identify.
I'm Mr. Morris for the people.
I am the witness.
I am the court.
I am attorney for defense, Mr. Minor.
And 215?
Yes.
The court for the record. Mr. Hernandez and Mr. Minor are present. The people are represented by Mr. Morris. Mr. Morris, please call your next witness.
I have no further witnesses. I think that is the extent of the evidence that the people wish to present, whether or not there was a refusal or whether or not the defendant was refused his right to have a test.
Mr. Minor, do you wish to present any affirmative evidence?
Yes, I want to call Sergeant Collins under 776. He is the most important witness in the case.
I am not sure Sergeant Collins is here.
776 would not apply. This is not a civil case. You can call anybody who is under subpoena.
Your Honor, as far as I know, did not excuse Sergeant Collins.
Where is Sergeant Collins?
I believe he is in Division 5. I had never heard he was ordered to remain.
Apparently there is nothing we can do until Sergeant Collins returns. We will pass the matter until he is available. I have been informed that will be in about 5 minutes.
Very good, Your Honor.
Very well. We are resuming in the Hernandez matter. Mr. Hernandez is present, represented by Attorney Minor. The people are represented by Mr. Morris. Mr. Minor, please call your first witness.
Sergeant Collins, if Your Honor pleases.
Thank you. Please state your name.
Sergeant John Collins, Collins.
Mr. Lucero is still in the courtroom. I just asked him to leave.
Thank you, counsel.
Mr. Minor.
Counsel has just handed me a document. I am looking at it if I may have a moment.
Your Honor, I hold in my hand a blank form which is entitled the medical screening form. May this be marked Defendant's B?
It may be so marked. Before you proceed, Mr. Minor, Mr. Morris, do you want peoples 1 and 2 admitted into evidence for the purposes of the 402 hearing?
Yes.
Any objection?
No.
They will be received.
Your Honor, in the event there is a trial in this matter, may it be stipulated that those exhibits would be received at the time of trial under the same designation.
Why don't we hold that until we see if there are any documents that precede that so we can keep them in chronology.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Defense B may be so marked.
May I approach?
My gracious order of this morning granting continuous permission to approach the witness carries over to this afternoon.
Thank you. Sergeant Collins, I show you Defendant's B and ask if you recognize that document.
Yes, I do.
What is it, please?
It is a medical screening form.
Is that a document that an officer taking a suspect for driving under the influence to a hospital, or the taking of blood hands to any member of the hospital personnel to be filled out by the way of questioning the suspect?
No.
What is the form used for?
The form is used for the booking officer, usually a civilian jailer, who fills that form out during the booking process at the police department.
Was such a form filled out to your knowledge in the case of Mr. Hernandez?
I don't know.
Should it have been filled out?
Based on Mr. Hernandez's refusal to cooperate during the booking process, to the best of my recollection, he refused to answer the questions on the medical screening form.
From where did you get that information?
Just from what I can remember from the incident that night.
Mr. Perry is the person who filled out the booking slip, is that right?
That's correct.
Did Mr. Perry tell you Mr. Hernandez refused to answer the questions on the medical screening form?
He may have.
Objection.
Beg your pardon?
He may have.
Are you saying you can't remember whether he did or not?
That's correct.
So in fact, you don't know for a fact whether or not this screening form was filled out at the time of the booking. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
If it were filled out, would it be part of the package?
No.
Where would it be?
It would be attached to the original booking sheet, and I believe it is sent to county jail in the transmittal forms.
Well, let's go so I can understand this here. You are saying that if the medical screening form was filled out, it would still be somewhere in the possession of some police agency.
Yes, it would be in the possession probably of the County of Los Angeles.
And how does it reach them?
It reaches them because we use the county booking system. We use county booking. All original county booking sheets we use are shipped to county jail. They are done so in a transmittal. That's to the best of my knowledge. You may want to subpoena the officer of records of the police department to get an exact determination of that.
Of which police department?
The Alhambra Police Department.
I will certainly try. Thank you for your advice. I want you to assume for the sake of this question that a hospital clerk or hospital personnel at the time that Mr. Hernandez went there for a blood test asked him a number of similar questions as appear on Defendant's B. Do you know what form, if any, that would be?
You said something about an assumption. I assume you wanted an opinion from that?
Yes.
I can tell you from my knowledge, the hospital doesn't ask any questions that are similar to that form which you showed me earlier, based on my experience of blood alcohols and the Alhambra Community Hospital.
Thank you. Sergeant, for how long have you been a police officer?
7.5 years.
Has all that time been with the Alhambra Police Department?
No, it has not.
What other police department?
San Gabriel Police Department.
And during that time, you have been involved in a number of driving under the influence cases?
Objection, leading.
Leading?
Yes, it is, but in the interest of saving some time, I will allow it. He is your witness, counsel.
I call to the court's attention, if I call a witness who is a hostile witness, there is,
I have seen nothing.
Gentlemen, I have not been requested to, nor have I determined that he is a hostile witness.
may I lay a foundation, Your Honor?
You may attempt to.
Thank you. Sergeant Collins, you are a member of the Alhambra Police Department,
Yes, I am.
and you are a member of the department that has brought the charge of driving under the influence of intoxicating beverage against my client, Mr. Hernandez.
That's correct.
You are familiar with the procedure of having a person go to Alhambra Community Hospital to have blood tests taken, are you not?
Yes.
What, if any, written documents does the officer provide the hospital in connection with this?
None.
So that the consent form is supplied by the hospital,
Yes.
and the hospital does not do it, in your experience, ask any questions concerning the prospective testee with respect to medical history or background?
Not to my knowledge.
I beg your pardon?
I think this will be somewhere at that 200 words per minute. We have Mr. Parsons for the plaintiff and Mr. Young for defense. Identify.
I'm Mr. Parsons for plaintiff.
I am the witness.
I am the court.
I am attorney for defense, Mr. Young.
This is Mr. Young. Line 13, page 13.
What'd you say?
We're good to line 13, page 13. We're starting there.
Okay.
In 14.
And it's Mr. Young questioning for the record. The cocaine you were trafficking in was in jars?
Right.
Okay, after you would deliver the cocaine to Mr. Reagan, would you have any other involvement with the cocaine?
No, I wouldn't.
Did you ever receive compensation from Mr. Reagan?
What do you mean? Money?
Yes.
Yes.
How much did Mr. Reagan pay you?
Roughly $50 to $100.
Was this $50 to $100 above the initial price of the cocaine?
No. Yes. No, it wasn't.
Did you personally, when you picked up the cocaine, did you pass money to the individual who you picked it up from?
Yes, I did.
Okay, how many times did you purchase cocaine? This pharmaceutical cocaine, Mr. Reed?
3 times.
How much money was passed between you and the individual you purchased it from?
Roughly $6,000.
Where did you receive the money from?
Tom Reagan.
So in other words, Tom Reagan would give you the money to go pick cocaine up from this other individual.
Right.
You don't recall the other individual's name?
No, I don't. The only thing I recall is that he was going to run for mayor in some county in California, some city in California.
You purchased it directly from this individual who was going to run for mayor,
Yes, I did.
and you don't recall his name?
No, he never told it to me.
Do you recall the city he was going to run for mayor in?
No, I don't.
Was he in fact ever elected mayor of any city?
I don't know.
When was this, Mr. Reed, when you were trafficking in cocaine? Recall the months and the year.
Well, it was roughly 3 years ago. I don't recall the months.
And you indicated that you did this for approximately 3 weeks.
Right.
Well, why did you cease to do this?
Well, for a few reasons. The risk was too high. I didn't want to get caught. I was feeling down about the whole thing. I didn't want to transport it anymore. And another reason was that I owed Tom Reagan some money, and he put a contract out on my life.
Did you owe Mr. Reagan money because you had absconded with some of the money to purchase cocaine?
No, it wasn't that. It was that he fronted me some money to buy some pounds of marijuana, and somebody ripped me off for the money, so I owed it to him.
You also had outlets to purchase the marijuana?
Can you repeat that?
You also had outlets to purchase marijuana.
I had connections to purchase it, yes, at that time.
From who would you purchase the marijuana from?
Well, I didn't. I knew people who were selling it.
I object.
I didn't, but I knew people who were dealing at that time.
Do you have an objection?
We are dealing with a period of time, 3 years ago now, Your Honor, I can't see the relevancy these particular questions have to do with this particular proceeding.
Well, he testified that he doesn't know who the people were, their names. It might be relevant as far as credibility. Objection sustained.
Mr. Reagan also gave you money to purchase marijuana.
Yes.
How much money did he give you?
Objection, Your Honor. I can't see how much money he gave him has any relevancy. Then that doesn't deal with any people. It's a transaction that took place 3 years ago.
Do you see any relevancy in the amount of money, Mr. Young?
I think the relevancy in the amount of money, Your Honor, would go to the degree of involvement Mr. Reed had in the undercover world. We are talking about $6,000 worth of cocaine. I would also like to know whether he was purchasing pounds, lids, kilos, so forth. That is a relevancy of the money, Your Honor.
My point, Your Honor, is that whether he purchased tons of the stuff doesn't have any relevancy to his credibility unless he suffered a felony conviction, which goes to credibility. But under the evidence code, the fact that somebody may have engaged in narcotics traffic in the past cannot be brought up in a court of law to impeach their credibility. The fact that he has had some involvement 3 years ago does not go to his credibility or his truthfulness in these particular proceedings of which he is a party today in this courtroom.
Objection sustained.
So you felt Mr. Reagan put a contract out on your life?
Yes.
Objection.
He's already testified to that, Your Honor.
I don't see the relevance.
Overruled.
Pardon me?
Overruled.
Thank you, Your Honor. Is that the reason you were trafficking in cocaine?
I said that was one of the reasons. I was just getting tired of the whole thing too.
Okay, what made you believe Mr. Reagan put a contract out on your life?
I'm going to object to the relevancy, however, Your Honor, of these particular questions. They are far beyond the scope of the original examination, and unless counsel can show some relevancy to the credibility as to whether or not he believes or didn't believe, it also goes to a state of mind that is hearsay and calls for an opinion and conclusion, and I don't think that it's relevant.
Well,
There is somewhat of a detailed outline in this police report, Your Honor, that indicates Mr. Reed's particular reason for wanting to work for the Eureka Police Department. His statements on the stand contradict what he stated in this police report, which I have received in discovery, and I think I should have a right to cross-examine him along those lines.
I will point out, though, Your Honor, he has not asked him any questions about what is found in the police report. He's now dealing with something 3 years ago. For one thing, Mr. Reed, I don't think wrote that police report, and if he did, then that's one thing. The second thing is if he did give certain reasons for coming to Eureka, which is a time that occurred apparently more than 2.5 years after the time in question. Certainly, a person's reasons for doing something 2.5 years ago may be different from what they do in January of 1976. As a consequence, Mr. Young can ask those questions, and we wouldn't object but to specific questions he asked about whether or not Mr. Reed believed that somebody put a contract out on his life 3 years ago doesn't appear to relate to what Mr. Young is using as a justification for asking this question.
all right. It is too remote. Objection sustained.
Have you had any recent contact with Mr. Reagan?
No, I haven't.
When was the last time you saw him?
Roughly almost 3 years ago.
Have you ever smoked marijuana, Mr. Reed?
Yes, I have.
Are you a frequent user of marijuana?
No, I'm not. I don't use it anymore. Okay, this will be from our 200 take. We have Mr. Christie for the plaintiff and Mr. Maurer for defense. That's identified.
I'm Mr. Christie for the plaintiff.
And the witness.
I am the court.
I'm attorney for defense, Mr. Maurer.
And that is Christie at the top, so start one up here.
Yeah.
And 14.
Okay. Is everybody ready?
Christie.
1, 2.
Yes.
For the record. Where are they stored in the crime lab?
We have an evidence vault that is right in the crime lab facility itself, and the evidence is stored in the vault.
Is that a secured facility?
Yes, sir, it is.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Do you have any questions, Mr. Maurer?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. What time did you collect these samples or exhibits that you just described in your testimony, Mr. Jones?
Well, sir, from reviewing my notes just prior to coming into court, I noted that I arrived at the scene about 12:15.
May that be stricken as non-responsive to the question, Your Honor?
I would think that it is responsive, Your Honor.
I think that it is. The answer will remain.
And therefore, I would say that I collected these items sometime between 12:15 and the time I left the scene, and I'm not sure exactly when that was.
Did you make any notes on any of these items or any of your reports as to the times that they were discovered or that you took them into your possession?
Other than the date and the general time that I arrived at the scene, no, sir.
What time did you arrive back at the crime lab?
I'm not sure if I made a note. If I may check my notes again, I could tell you.
Go ahead.
No, sir, I did not have any notations at all as to when I returned to the crime lab.
You said you returned, or when you got back to the crime laboratory, which is located in the city of San Bernardino.
Yes, sir.
And at the time, it was in the old courthouse.
I believe that's right. We did not move to our new facility until November of last year.
Okay, and you said you returned these items that you collected to an evidence vault.
Yes, sir.
Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And you said it's a secured facility. How is it secured?
The evidence vault at the time is a large safe. It has a combination. It has a combination lock on the outside and a large handle that you had to turn after you got the correct combination. There was no other entrance into the vault other than through this door, which was locked every night and opened every morning.
This facility of yours was in a public building, was it not?
I believe that it is a public building. It was the courthouse downtown. The crime lab at the time was located, I believe it's the southwest corner on the first floor of the building.
Yes, and it was quite crowded.